I used to think fire was the worst thing that could hit a neighborhood. But I was wrong, because before the flames came, there were warnings, dozens of them, and every single one was ignored. I measured that gate. I filed the reports. I quoted the fire code word for word. They laughed, called me paranoid, tried to silence me with fines, fake violations, even legal threats. Until one night when the sirens wailed, and the first fire truck slammed into the steel arch they swore was perfectly safe. And while flames swallowed a family home, all the HOA could do was watch, helpless, panicked, trapped behind the very gate they built to keep control. They thought I was overreacting, until their house caught fire. The morning they broke ground on that doomed iron sentinel, I stood at my front window clutching a mug of coffee gone cold, watching a mistake take shape before my eyes. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across Lot 24, my home, for 19 years in this manicured corner of Dunfield. Across the street, a crew in reflective vests maneuvered steel posts into the earth, their pneumatic drills chewing through asphalt like it was butter. A single flyer taped crookedly to the community mailbox fluttered in the breeze, an HOA proclamation of our grand new entrance, complete with a watercolor sketch of wrought iron elegance. No measurements, no blueprints, just promises of prestige wrapped in gold foil. I knew the moment I saw the top rail settle into place that it was too low, not by a little. By enough to trap a ladder truck to choke a pumper to cost someone everything, when flames were already climbing the walls. My chest tightened the way it used to before a 3-alarm call when the radio crackled and you could taste disaster in the air. At 61, I'm not the kind to panic. 26 years with Dunfield Fire Department taught me to keep my pulse steady when the world's falling apart. I've crawled through smoke so thick it felt like drowning in tar. I've carried children out of burning homes, their small hands limp in mine. I've stood in courtrooms, voice calm, explaining to judges why a half-inch code violation could mean a body bag. So when I say that ornamental barrier was a death trap, I'm not being dramatic. I'm seeing the math. 11 feet 4 inches from pavement to crown, 2 feet 2 inches short of what a fire truck needs to clear. But math doesn't impress people who think beauty outweighs survival. The crew tightened bolts with the precision of undertakers sealing a coffin. The youngest worker, barely out of his teens, caught my stare and offered a half-hearted wave, probably thinking I was just another nosy retiree. I set my mug on the sill, slipped on my old work boots, and crossed the street, forcing my steps to stay slow, non-confrontational. "Morning, folks," I said, nodding to the trio. "Any chance you've got clearance specs for that archway?" The kid blinked his wrench, pausing mid-turn. I think it's in the plan book somewhere. Mind if I take a look?" He glanced at the foreman, a grizzled man with a clipboard and a permanent scowl. The older guy didn't even look up. "We're just following orders, pal. HOA gave us the design. You got questions, take it up with them." So I did. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd written incident reports for decades, and drafted a formal email to the HOA board. Subject urgent. Verification of entrance structure compliance with IFC 503.2.1. I kept it crisp, professional, the way you write when you know nobody's listening, but you need the record anyway. I attached 3 photos, one of the half-built arch with a 6-foot level for scale, another with my tape measure stretched to 11 feet 4 inches, and a third overlaying the silhouette of Engine 14, my old rig, showing how it would scrape the crown. Then I quoted the International Fire Code word for word. Fire apparatus access roads shall have an unobstructed vertical clearance of not less than 13 feet 6 inches. I hit send, leaned back, and waited for reason to do its job. 2 days later, the neighborhood woke to a new edict. No email reply, no acknowledgement. Just a glossy bulletin taped to every lamppost and posted to the community's private Facebook group. Our stunning new entrance symbolizes the safety and elegance of our community. Please refrain from circulating unauthorized speculation regarding its design. No signature, but I didn't need one. That was Caroline Mayweather's handiwork, HOA president, queen of optics, an architect of a neighborhood where dissent was as welcome as a grease fire. Caroline didn't just lead the HOA. She wielded it like a scepter, her every decision polished to a high shine. 3 years ago, I'd made the mistake of questioning the retention pond behind my lot, proving it was 6 inches too shallow to handle a hard rain. The city red-tagged it, and Caroline never forgave me. To her, I wasn't Alan Mercer, retired battalion chief. I was the man who dared to measure her perfection and found it wanting. That evening, I watched her glide past the construction site with 2 board members trailing like loyal courtiers. Ronnie Schultz, who once fined me for leaving a ladder visible for 25 hours, nodded at the arch like it was a masterpiece. Deborah Lane, whose every sentence began with "as per our bylaws," scribbled notes as if she were cataloging a sacred relic. They stood beneath the unfinished frame heads, tilted back, admiring their own reflection in the steel. Not one of them thought to measure a damn thing. I closed my curtains, but the image lingered, that iron threshold, glowing under the streetlights, smug and immovable. It wasn't just a gate. It was a dare, a challenge to anyone foolish enough to think safety mattered more than status. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a memory stirred. A little girl named Emily. 13 years dead, her voice faint but sharp, whispering the warning I'd carry to my grave. Sleep didn't come that night. Not really. Because I knew with the bone-deep certainty of a man who's seen too many fires that one day the sirens would come screaming through the dark, racing toward a wall of arrogance they couldn't clear. And when that day came, every inch they'd shaved for, beauty would be paid for, in seconds we couldn't afford. The archway finished itself in record time, as if the neighborhood were collectively holding its breath. For the moment, we could all pretend we lived somewhere important. By Friday, the mechanical arms were fully mounted, 2 sweeping black wings edged in gold that parted with a theatrical sigh whenever a resident's key fob sang its little electronic greeting. Matte paint LED accent lights a discreet brass plaque that read, "Dunfield Estates, Eston 1998. Residents slowed to a full 5 seconds longer than necessary on their way in, admiring the reflection of their luxury SUVs in the polished steel. Someone posted a slow-motion video set to swelling orchestral music, "Welcome to the fortress we deserve," #gated and grateful. I watched from my porch as a mother in yoga pants posed her toddler in front of the new threshold for an Instagram story. The child reached up, curious fingers brushing the underside of the crown. 11 feet, 4 inches above his head. 26 inches short of mercy. That night, the servo motors practiced their nightly ballet whir. Clunk, pause, whir, clunk. The sound crawled through my bedroom window like a slow heartbeat. I lay in the dark counting the seconds between arrivals, wondering how many of those drivers realized they were driving under a guillotine dressed up as decor. The next morning, I was out before the dew burned off. I carried my old DeWalt tape, a can of fluorescent orange surveyor's paint, and the stubborn calm of a man who has already attended too many funerals. I backed my F-150 directly beneath the crown, climbed into the bed, and stretched the tape from asphalt to steel one last time. The number hadn't magically improved overnight. Still 11-4. I took 32 photographs from every conceivable angle, then knelt and painted a thick, unmistakable stripe across the pavement. Required clearance, 13-6. Actual clearance, 11-4. 26 inches short of survival. A. Mercer Lot at 24. Retired DFD battalion chief. I stood back to admire my work. The orange glowed like fresh blood in the morning sun. By 10 o'clock, a landscaping truck arrived. By 11, the stripe was gone, pressure washed into a ghost that only showed when the light hit just right. By 2 o'clock, a crisp white envelope slid into my mailbox. Inside, a $150 citation for defacement of community property. Caroline's looping signature looked almost festive, the little heart she dotted her I's with particularly cheerful that day. I paid the fine in exact change at the clubhouse drop box and asked for a receipt and tucked both into the binder that was already growing thick. Wednesday night arrived like clockwork, first Wednesday of the month, HOA meeting. I showered, shaved, and put on my old Class A uniform shirt, the one with the gold bugles still polished on the collar. The fabric still carried the faint scent of smoke no dry cleaner could ever quite remove. I walked into the clubhouse 5 minutes early. The air was thick with lavender disinfectant and the nervous perfume of people who had learned to smile while sharpening knives. They worked through the liturgy with practiced efficiency, pet waste violations. Holiday decor calendar, no inflatables taller than 6 feet, No colored lights after January 10th, the eternal debate over whether artificial turf counted as living landscape. I waited, hands folded in my lap, feeling the old familiar calm that used to settle over me right before we kicked in a door. When Caroline finally intoned "Open Forum, any new business," I stood. Alan Mercer, what, 24? I began, voice carrying easily in the hushed room. Retired Battalion Chief, 26 years with Dunfield Fire. I am formally requesting an immediate third-party measurement of the new entrance archway and temporary suspension of its operation. Current clearance is 11 feet 4 inches. International Fire Code 503.2.1 requires 13 feet 6 inches minimum for fire apparatus. That is a hard, non-negotiable legal standard. I have photographs, measurements, and code references available for the board right now. I held up the manila envelope. A dozen heads swiveled toward Caroline. She didn't even glance at the envelope. She simply tapped her Mont Blanc pen twice on the agenda and offered the room a smile thin enough to cut glass. Thank you for your input, Mr. Mercer. The board has full confidence in our approved design. Your concern is noted and will be taken under advisement. Madam President, with respect, this isn't a suggestion. It's a life safety violation. I'm happy to walk outside right now with any board member and a tape measure. Meeting adjourned. The gavel cracked like a starter pistol. Ronnie Schultz was out of his chair before the echo died, hand hovering near my elbow as if to escort me. I looked down at his manicured fingers, then up at him. He dropped his hand like he'd touched a live wire. The room emptied in a rustle of whispers and folding chairs. He's unhinged. Always has to be the hero. Wearing his dress blues to an HOA meeting, can you imagine? I walked home under a sky-bruised purple with coming rain. The archway's accent lights had come on automatically, bathing the entrance in a soft, expensive glow. It looked like a movie set. It looked like a lie. The next morning, my mailbox contained a second citation. My front hedge now exceeded allowable height by exactly 4 inches. A Polaroid was attached, time-stamped 7:14 a.m., showing Caroline herself crouched in my yard, with a ruler, her little designer dog, sniffing at the leaves. She must have measured it while I was still asleep. 4 inches. They were measuring me in inches now. I trimmed the hedge that afternoon, took before and after photos, paid the second fine, and added everything to the binder. The red label on the spine was starting to feel prophetic, because I had learned something in 26 years of running into burning buildings. When people start measuring you in inches, they're really telling you how small they hope to make you feel. But I had carried grown men down ladders and children out of windows. I had stood in the ashes of homes and promised grieving families that someone would be held accountable. 4 inches was nothing. I had 26 more to fight for, and I was just getting started. The retaliation didn't arrive in a single thunderclap. It came in quiet surgical cuts, the kind that barely sting until you realize you're bleeding out. First, it was the trash bins. I rolled them to the curb at 6:00 a.m. Thursday, same as always. When I returned from my walk at 7:45, both 96-gallon totes were parked dead center in my driveway, blocking the garage door like twin green sentries. The city truck had already come and gone. I'd watched it from the corner. Someone had moved them deliberately, then vanished. No footprints, no tire tracks, no note. Just the message, "We can touch what's yours when you're not looking." I took photos from 4 angles, printed them, and slid them into the binder. 3 days later came the shed. My 12 by 16 backyard shed had stood peacefully since 2017. Painted HOA approved desert sand roof pitch, exactly 512 as required. I received a certified letter claiming it now violated current visibility standards because a new neighbor had complained the color had faded to an unsightly beige. The letter demanded I repaint or remove the structure within 14 days or face $100. Daily fines. I dug out the original 2017 approval form, signed by Caroline herself, scanned it, photographed it, and attached it to a polite appeal. 2 days later, the appeal was denied with a single sentence: prior approval does not exempt current non-compliance. No explanation of what exactly had changed in 8 years. I added the entire exchange to the binder. The pages were getting thick enough to need a second rubber band. Then the violations started arriving like clockwork, each one more creative than the last. Excessive wear on mailbox. Paint the mailbox was 4 months old. Commercial-grade vehicle parked in residential zone, my 2009 F-150, no logos, no decals, same truck I'd driven since retirement. Unauthorized storage of lawn equipment, visible from common area, a rake leaning inside my fenced side yard, visible only if you pressed your face to the slats. Every citation came with a glossy photo time-stamped between midnight and 500 a.m. Someone was prowling my property, in the dark, hunting for crimes. I stopped being surprised. I started setting up motion-activated trail cameras. The first night they caught Ronnie Schultz strolling past at 2:17 a.m. with his phone held at chest height, flashlight beam sweeping my fence line like he was casing a bank. No leash, no dog in sight, just a slow, deliberate orbit of my house. He never looked up at the camera. He didn't have to. The message was the same. We see you when you think you're alone. I saved the footage, burned it to disk, and added it to the binder. Most neighbors crossed the street when they saw me coming. The ones who used to wave now studied their phones with sudden fascination. Only Elaine from Lot 27, quiet widow, soft voice, eyes that had seen their own share of loss, ever spoke to me directly anymore. She caught me at the mailbox one morning, clutching her robe closed against the chill. "Alan," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder, "they're saying you've lost your mind, that you're harassing the board over nothing." I gave her a tired smile. If 26 inches of clearance is nothing, then I guess I have. Her fingers tightened on a stack of envelopes. They can make life difficult. My husband sat on the board years ago. He warned me what happens when you stand in Caroline's way. "I'm not standing in her way," I said. "I'm standing in the way of a fire truck that won't fit." There's a difference. She studied my face for a long moment, then pressed something into my hand, a small folded square of paper. "Not everyone's afraid," she murmured, and walked away before I could thank her. I unfolded the note under the porch light. "You're right about the arch. We've all noticed delivery trucks scraping paint. Some of us are scared to speak. Thank you for not being scared." A neighbor who remembers Emily's name too. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat at the kitchen table instead, the binder open in front of me like a battle map. Every violation, every photo, every midnight prowler time-stamped and annotated. I created a new section titled Pattern of Intimidation and began cross-referencing dates. The fines were escalating geometrically. At this rate, I'd be bankrupt myself before the first frost. So I went on offense. I drove downtown to the city permitting office and filed an open records request for every document related to the archway plans, inspections, engineer stamps, final sign-offs. The clerk, a tired woman with purple streaks in her hair, raised an eyebrow when I slid the form across the counter. "You're the third person this month asking about Dunfield Estates," she said quietly. "Something going on out there. Only if you consider preventable death something," I replied. She stamped my request without another word. While I waited for the records, I hand-delivered a second thicker package to the fire marshal's office, 30 pages of photos, measurements, code citations, and a cover letter that ended with the line I'd never dared say aloud before. "If a structure fire occurs, and apparatus cannot enter due to this obstruction, the liability will rest squarely on the shoulders of those who were warned and chose aesthetics over human life." I signed it Alan R. Mercer, Battalion Chief, Routine, Dunfield Fire Department. 3 days later, I received a phone call from a very polite, very tired administrative assistant. "Mr. Mercer, the fire marshal, appreciates your vigilance, but private HOA roads fall under municipal zoning, not direct fire department enforcement. You'll need to file with city code compliance." I thanked her, hung up, and filed with city code compliance the same afternoon. Another 30-page packet, another certified mail receipt. The binder now required a third rubber band. That night, the retaliation found a new gear I hadn't known existed. I came home from the grocery store to find every sprinkler head on my front lawn twisted 90 degrees, spraying straight up like geysers. The entire yard was a shallow lake, water sheeting across the sidewalk and into the street. My water bill would be astronomical. A neighbor's security camera caught a figure in a dark hoodie face obscured tampering with the valves at 3:42 a.m. I didn't bother calling the police. I just shut the water off at the street, mopped the sidewalk with a push broom, and added the still frames to the binder. Because I had learned long ago that bullies only stop when the cost of bullying finally outweighs the pleasure. And I was about to make it very, very expensive. The pressure didn't let up. It simply changed shape the way fire shifts from open flame to hidden smolder just before it punches through a ceiling. One Thursday morning, I opened my front door to find a brand new neon yellow violation sticker plastered across my truck windshield. Oversized commercial vehicle. Immediate removal required. My 2009 F-150. Same truck I'd driven to every shift for 15 years. Same truck that had carried ladder's hoses, and once a terrified golden retriever out of a flooded basement. No commercial plates, no lettering, no roof rack, even. Just an old retiree's daily driver that apparently now offended the residential character of the neighborhood. I peeled the sticker off, photographed it front and back, and added it to the binder. Page 187. That same afternoon, a tow truck appeared at the end of my driveway, hazard lights blinking like it had every right to be there. The driver, a kid who couldn't have been older than 22, looked embarrassed when I walked out. Got a call for an illegal vehicle at this address, he mumbled, eyes on his clipboard instead of me. Tell whoever called that if they touch my truck, they'll be buying me a new one in small claims court by sunset, I said, calm as Sunday dinner. He left without another word. But the message had landed. They were willing to escalate to property seizure. I stopped leaving the house unless absolutely necessary. Groceries were delivered. Mail was picked up at the post office. I worked in the yard only when I could see all four corners of the street at once. Paranoia, maybe. But paranoia is just pattern recognition when the pattern is trying to bury you. Then, Elaine showed up again, this time at dusk, carrying a Tupperware of banana bread still warm from the oven, and something far more valuable tucked beneath it. I can't stay long, she might be watching, she whispered, glancing toward Caroline's white Colonial at the end of the cul-de-sac. My husband kept everything from when he was on the board. I never threw anything away. She pressed a small flash drive into my palm like contraband. Meeting minutes, emails, budget spreadsheets. The gate project is in a folder called Entrance Enhancement 2023. There's stuff in there, Alan. I thanked her, promised her name would never appear anywhere, and watched her hurry back down the sidewalk, clutching the empty bread container like a shield. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with every light in the house, off except the glow of my laptop screen. I opened the drive. What I found turned my stomach colder than any fire I'd ever faced. Internal board emails from 25 months earlier. A licensed contractor had submitted a bid that included raising the arch to 14 euro to guarantee emergency vehicle access. Caroline's reply, time-stamped 2:14 a.m. Aesthetics are non-negotiable. Reduce height to 11 to 6 inches maximum. We'll handle permitting later. A scanned letter from the same contractor warning that 11 or 6 was still 6 inches under code and refusing to sign off on the final design. A follow-up email from Caroline to the board. We have secured an alternative vendor who is willing to work within our vision. The alternative vendor. A company registered to her cousin's LLC. Budget line item labeled Contingency and Compliance, showing $18,400 paid to a consultant who, according to state records, had been dead for 14 months. They hadn't just ignored warnings. They had shopped for someone willing to lie on paper, then buried the truth under layers of fake invoices. I sat back, heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't negligence anymore. This was deliberate, documented fraud with a body count waiting to happen. I made 3 encrypted backups of the drive. One went into my fireproof safe. One I mailed to my nephew in Tucson, with instructions to open only if something happened to me. The third I carried in my pocket every single day after that. The next morning, I did something I swore I'd never do again. After retirement, I put on the full dress uniform, hat badge, white gloves, and drove straight to Station 14. The new battalion chief, Carla Dominguez, was younger than my daughter's age, sharp-eyed, and no nonsense. She took one look at the uniform and the thick folder under my arm and waved me into her office without a word. I laid it all out: measurements, code sections, retaliation timeline, and finally the smoking gun emails from Elaine's drive. When I finished, Carla leaned back, arms crossed, staring at the silhouette photo of Engine 14 scraping the crown. If we get a box alarm at Dunfield Estates and that rig can't get through... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I have a complete paper trail showing multiple parties were warned in writing, I said quietly. If it happens, the liability won't be on the department. It'll be on them. She nodded slowly. I'm flagging the address in Dispatch Kiad and forwarding everything to fire prevention. But Alan, off the record, get a lawyer. These people play ugly. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Already did. Richard Kessler, retired municipal attorney shark in a cardigan, met me for lunch the next day. I slid the binder and the flash drive across the table like I was dealing cards. He flipped through the pages, whistling low. "This isn't a gate hide, Alan. This is racketeering dressed up in khakis and landscaping fines. Can we stop the arch from operating until it's fixed?" "We can do better than stop it," he said, eyes gleaming the way they must have in court. "We can sue them into the ground for willful endangerment, retaliation, and fraud. And we'll file first, preemptive strike." He started drafting that afternoon a cease and desist letter on heavy cream stock, followed by a demand to immediately suspend archway operation pending independent engineering review and full compliance verification. We sent certified copies to Caroline, the entire board, and the HOA's registered agent, and just for fun, the local news tip line. 3 days of silence. Then, at 2:47 a.m. on a Sunday, Caroline's resignation hit the neighborhood email blast, a single paragraph announcing her temporary medical leave and wishing the community continued prosperity. No one moved out of the master bedroom that night. I stood on my porch in the dark watching the moving truck's red taillights disappear down the street, the twisted irony settling over me like morning fog. She could run from subpoenas, she could not run from sirens, because somewhere in the distance, I could already hear them coming. The cease and desist letter landed on Caroline's doorstep the same week the first hard frost glazed the lawns. Richard had written it like a scalpel, polite, precise, and sharp enough to draw blood. It cited state statutes, municipal code, the flash drive evidence, and ended with a single unemotional sentence: "Continued operation of the non-compliant ornamental barrier constitutes willful endangerment of human life and will be treated as such in civil and criminal proceedings." We gave them 10 business days to dismantle the archway or face injunction. They answered in the only language they knew: escalation. Monday morning, I found my front yard toilet papered, not the playful high school kind, but soaked overnight in the sprinklers, so the paper froze into heavy dripping ropes that snapped the crepe myrtles and left and right. Tuesday, my mailbox was stuffed with raw shrimp. By Wednesday, the stench had drawn every stray cat in Dunfield. Thursday, someone poured used motor oil in a perfect circle around my truck tires. The black halo glistened like an accusation. Each incident was photographed, bagged as evidence, and added to the growing stack Richard now called Exhibit A through Triple Z. But the real gut punch came on a gray Saturday afternoon. A sheriff's deputy knocked on my door holding a thick packet. Temporary restraining order. Caroline Mayweather plaintiff claiming I had engaged in a campaign of harassment, intimidation, and defamation that has caused her severe emotional distress and fear for her safety. Attached were sworn statements from Ronnie Schultz and Deborah Lane asserting I had repeatedly threatened violence and vandalized community property. They even included a grainy still from someone's ring camera, me in dress uniform, standing under the archway at night, holding a tape measure face lit by the LED accents. The caption read, "Subject photographed prowling entrance at 1:14 a.m. I laughed out loud, the sound startling the deputy. "Son, that's me measuring the damn thing at their own board meeting. Check the timestamp on the clubhouse security feed." He shifted uncomfortably. "I just served the papers, sir." I signed, thanked him, and called Richard before the cruiser had even pulled away. "Congratulations," Richard said when I read him the filing. "They just handed us the keys to the kingdom. You can't buy discovery this good." He filed an emergency motion to dissolve the TRO and countersued the same day Alan Mercer and 27 concerned residents versus Dunfield Estates, HOA Board of Directors for malicious prosecution, abuse of process, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We attached the flash drive emails, the midnight prowler footage, the falsified contractor bids, and every violation notice they'd ever sent me. Then we scheduled a press conference for the following Tuesday. The neighborhood fractured overnight. Half the residents deleted their Facebook accounts. The other half started a private group titled Dunfield Truth and Safety. Within 48 hours, it had 112 members and a pinned post that was just a single photo, the archway with a red circle slash over it, and the caption, "26 inches could kill your child." Elaine sent me a text from a burner phone. "They're panicking. Keep going." I didn't answer. I was too busy preparing for the storm I could already feel building in my bones. Monday night, the power went out on my entire block from 11:07 p.m. to 3:19 a.m. The utility company confirmed no outage reported anywhere else in the city. Someone had thrown the master breaker at the transformer. My security cameras ran on battery and caught exactly nothing but darkness. Tuesday morning, I woke to find every tire on my truck slashed sidewalls, carved with what looked like a box cutter. The word snitch was spray painted in dripping black letters across my garage door. I didn't wash it off. I left it there like a badge. At 10 a.m. sharp, I stood on the courthouse steps in full dress uniform, Richard at my left, Rosa Gutierrez, the soft-spoken retired teacher who had quietly taken over as interim president, at my right, and 17 residents behind us holding printed copies of the cease and desist letter. Channel 8, Channel 13, and the Tribune were already waiting. Richard spoke first, calm and surgical. Then he handed the microphone to me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My name is Alan Mercer. I spent 26 years running into burning buildings so the people of this city could sleep safely. Today I'm asking one simple thing, that the Dunfield Estates HOA obey the same fire code the rest of us live by. They were warned in writing multiple times that their decorative archway is 26 inches too low for a fire truck. They chose aesthetics over human life. They chose retaliation over responsibility. And now they are trying to silence a retired firefighter with lawsuits and vandalism because he refuses to let a child die the way Emily died 13 years ago. I held up the helmet cam still I'd obtained from a friend at Station 14, the silhouette of Engine 14 wedged under the crown red lights strobing uselessly. This is not theoretical. This is what happens when vanity meets emergency response. The cameras flashed like lightning. Behind me, Rosa spoke for the first time in public. The interim board has voted to suspend all future meetings, open to the public and live streamed. We are requesting an immediate independent engineering inspection, and we stand with Mr. Mercer. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones came out. Hashtags were born. By that evening, 26 inches was trending in Dunfield. Caroline's house, now former colonial, on Lot 12, sat dark and empty, the moving trucks long gone. Rumors said she was staying with relatives 3 states away. Ronnie Schultz's real estate sign went up in his yard the next morning, for sale by owner, motivated. Richard called me at 9:03 p.m. Judge just signed the emergency injunction. The archway comes down at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow, or the sheriff does it for them. And the city attorney's office opened a criminal investigation this afternoon. Looks like your binder is about to become required reading downtown. I exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding for months. Outside, the night was perfectly still. No servo motors, no whir-clunk heartbeat, just crickets and the faint smell of coming winter. I walked to the end of my driveway and looked down the street toward the iron sentinel that had ruled us all. Its LED lights were still glowing gold trim, catching the moonlight like a vain dying star. Tomorrow it would be scrap metal. Tonight it stood there one last time, smug and untouchable, waiting for the sirens it had been built to defy. I spoke to it the way you speak to an old enemy you finally have cornered. You picked the wrong ghost to wake up. Then I went inside, locked the door, and for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of smoke. Tuesday, 11:42 p.m. A single sharp pop cracked the night open like a gunshot. I was in my recliner half watching an old episode of Rescue 911 on mute when the second sound came, a deep wooden groan, the kind a house makes right before it gives up and dies. Then the sky to the west turned the color of fresh blood. I didn't grab a jacket, I didn't grab my phone, I just ran. By the time I reached the corner of Bellflower Court, half the neighborhood was already outside in robes and slippers, phones glowing in the dark like fireflies. Flames punched through the second-story windows of Lot 12, Caroline Mayweather's white colonial, and rolled upward in greedy orange sheets. The roof sagged, then collapsed inward with a roar that shook the ground under my bare feet. And then the sirens came. 3 rising tones, fast and urgent, structure fire fully involved. I sprinted. I reached the front lawn the same moment Engine 14 rounded the bend, lights strobing red across the perfect hedges. The driver, a kid I didn't recognize, stood on the brake tires screaming. The cab rocked forward, ladder assembly rising like a spear, and slammed dead into the ornamental crown. The impact was deafening metal on metal, a sickening crunch that bent the wrought iron arch backward like a crushed soda can. Sparks showered. The engine lurched to a stop, wedged tight siren dying into a pathetic electronic cough. The driver's door flew open. We're stuck! We're fucking stuck. I didn't wait for orders. I vaulted the side fence, landed in mulch, and charged the back patio. Smoke rolled out the broken sliding door in thick black waves. Caroline was on the deck barefoot in a silk nightgown, clutching her 8-year-old granddaughter to her chest. Both of them were gray, with Ash coughing so hard I thought their ribs would crack. "Anyone else inside?" I yelled over the roar. She couldn't speak. She just pointed upward, eyes wild. "Richard." "Upstairs. Smoke." No gear, no mask, no time. I ripped a kitchen towel off the patio chair, soaked it under the outdoor faucet, wrapped it over my mouth, and kicked the sliding door the rest of the way in. The heat hit like a wall. Radiant waves curled the paint on the walls, blistered the granite countertops. I dropped low, belly to the floor, counting breaths like I'd taught 1,000 probies. Living room fully involved, stairs already gone. I crawled through the dining room, past the overturned china cabinet, into the hallway. Found him halfway down the corridor. Caroline's husband, Richard, collapsed against the baseboard, trying to drag himself with one arm while the other limp at his side. His pajamas were singed face black with soot. "Got you," I grunted, hooking my arms under his shoulders. He weighed nothing. Adrenaline makes liars of us all. We were 3 steps from the back door when the hallway ceiling let go. A flaming beam crashed behind us, showering sparks and burning insulation. I threw myself forward, Richard's dead weight dragging behind me, and we tumbled onto the patio in a heap as the entire second floor folded in on itself with a sound like the world ending. Paramedics swarmed. Oxygen masks. Blankets. Caroline sobbing uncontrollably, clutching her granddaughter so tight the child whimpered. I rolled onto my back, lungs on fire, and looked toward the street. Engine 14 was still pinned under the mangled arch ladder, twisted like a pretzel. Crews were offloading hose lines by hand, running them in on foot, while the pumper sat useless, 30 yards away, unable to reach the hydrant. 7 minutes. That's how long the incident log would later read from time of arrival to water on the fire. 7 minutes because of 26 inches of vanity. The house didn't stand a chance. It exhaled one final exhausted groan and pancaked into its own basement, sending up a pillar of sparks that lit the night like the 4th of July. Miraculously, no one died. Richard Mayweather spent 16 days in the burn unit with 2nd and 3rd-degree burns and smoke inhalation bad enough to scar his lungs for life. The granddaughter had minor burns and nightmares that would last longer. Caroline herself was treated for smoke inhalation and released the next morning. The house was gone. The archway stood twisted, and obscene fire truck paint scraped along its crown like war paint. I went home at dawn, soot in my hair lungs raw, and sat on my porch until the sun came up. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer blinding rage that comes when you realize you were right, and it still almost wasn't enough. At 7:03 a.m., I uploaded everything photos of the wrecked arch helmet cam stills from the trapped Engine 14, the incident timeline. The 7-minute delay report I sweet-talked out of a friend at dispatch. I sent the package to 3 places. 1. The local news tip line, time-stamped 7:04 a.m. 2. The city fire marshal, 7:05 a.m. 3. The Dunfield Estates HOA official mailing list, 7:06 a.m. No message, no commentary, just the images, raw and undeniable. By 8:12 a.m., my phone started exploding. By 9:00 a.m., Channel 13 was live in front of the Smoking Ruins reporter Dana Wu, standing beside the bent arch with Engine 14 still wedged beneath it like a trophy. By noon, the story was national. Fire truck trapped by 26 inches, HOA from hell. And at 6:47 p.m., a single email appeared in my inbox. From C. Mayweather, subject, no subject. You were right, I'm sorry, CM. I stared at those 4 words until the screen went dark. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close to enough. But it was the first crack in the monument they had built to their own arrogance. And cracks, I knew from long experience, are where the light finally gets in. The morning after the fire, the neighborhood smelled like a battlefield that had lost its war with smoke. Wet ash melted vinyl siding, scorched dreams. The air was so thick with it, you could chew it. Yellow caution tape snapped in the breeze around the blackened skeleton of Lot 12. And the twisted iron archway stood bent and dripping a broken crown on a dead king. People didn't come out to gawk this time. They came out to mourn even if they didn't know it yet. I walked the block at sunrise, with my phone taking 360-degree photos of everything. The scrape marks on the fire truck's ladder, the bent crown, the tire tracks where crews had dragged hose by hand. I interviewed the young driver off record, while he sat on the curb helmet in his lap, still shaking. 7 minutes, Mr. Mercer. 7 goddamn minutes because of a fucking garden ornament. 7 minutes. In fire dynamics, that's 3 doublings of heat release. That's enough to turn a room and contents into a blast furnace. I sent him home with a quiet, "You did everything right, kid," and kept recording. By 9:00 a.m., the news vans arrived like vultures in satellite dishes. Dana Wu from Channel 13 found me near the archway. "Mr. Mercer, we got your photos. This is going nationwide in the next hour. How does it feel to be proven right?" I looked past her to the smoldering ruin, then to the bent steel that had almost cost 3 lives. "Feels like failure," I said, because I shouldn't have had to be right. The clip aired every 30 minutes for the next 48 hours. Fire truck trapped trended higher than any local story in a decade. The helmet cam footage leaked officially anonymously and racked up 8 million views in 12 hours. You could hear the driver screaming on the radio, "Command Engine 14 is physically obstructed by community gate," repeating, "We cannot advance." Comments poured in from firefighters across the country. "This is why we have minimum clearance codes." HOA just murdered response time. Prayers for the family, fury for the board. By Wednesday, the city fire marshal held a press conference on the courthouse steps. "In 29 years, I have never seen a clearer case of infrastructure directly endangering public safety. That ornamental barrier was a death trap. It is only by the grace of God and the actions of one retired firefighter that we are not holding a different kind of press conference today." He never said my name, but he didn't have to. The cameras found me anyway. That afternoon, Richard Kessler filed the injunction we'd been holding in reserve: immediate removal of the archway, freezing of all HOA funds related to the project, and a temporary restraining order against the old board members, preventing them from leaving the state. The judge signed it before close of business. Thursday morning, 2 city flatbeds and a sheriff's escort rolled in at 8:00 sharp. Cutting torches sparked. Residents stood on their lawns in robes and slippers, coffee forgotten in their hands, watching the symbol of their exclusivity sliced into scrap like it was nothing. No one cheered. Some cried. A few just stared like they were waking up from a very long, very expensive nap. Ronnie Schultz showed up in golf attire, face the color of old oatmeal. He tried to argue with the foreman. "You can't do this, we have permits." The foreman handed him the court order without a word. Ronnie read 3 lines, folded the paper once, and walked away without looking back. That night, the clubhouse hosted an emergency meeting that wasn't really a meeting. It was a reckoning. Rosa Gutierrez stood at the podium, voice steady, the new interim board behind her like quiet sentinels. "Effective immediately, the sitting board is suspended. We are calling for a full forensic audit, dissolution, election, and third-party oversight. All in favor." Every hand in the room shot up, even the ones that had once belonged to Caroline's inner circle. A woman I didn't recognize stood up, voice cracking. "My son had a seizure last March. Paramedics were delayed 4 minutes because the gate sensor malfunctioned. I was too scared to speak then. I'm not scared anymore." An elderly man from Lot 11 followed. "They fined me $8,000 over 8 months because I wouldn't pay into the beautification fund. I have the receipts." A teenage girl read a statement her disabled veteran father had written because he couldn't face the crowd. They told him his wheelchair van was unsightly. He stopped parking in his own driveway. One by one, they came forward, stories spilling out like pus from a wound finally lanced. When it was over, Rosa looked straight at me in the back row. "This doesn't fix what happened, but it's a start. And Mr. Mercer, thank you for refusing to let us burn." I didn't stand, I just nodded once. Outside, someone had already been busy. Across the twisted remains of the arch, in thick red spray paint, still dripping. Warning ignored. I didn't smile, but I didn't look away either. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come in handcuffs. Sometimes it comes in sparks and cutting torches, and the sound of a neighborhood finally finding its voice. And for the first time since the day they poured the concrete footings, I heard something I hadn't heard in months. Silence from the servo motors. The Iron Sentinel was dead. Long live whatever came next. The autopsy began the day the archway died. a forensic accounting firm hired by the interim board and paid for by the city after the fire marshal threatened to decertify the entire neighborhood for emergency response, rolled in with 3 white vans and a moving boxes full of subpoenas. By noon, the clubhouse had a new sign taped over the old brass plaque, City of Dunfield, Audit in Progress, No Unauthorized Entry. They worked for 6 straight weeks. What they pulled out of the files was uglier than the charred beams of Lot 12. 46,800 in landscape enhancements that existed only on paper. A no-bid gate contract awarded to Premier Ironworks LLC, whose registered agent shared Caroline's maiden name, and a P.O. box in Panama City, Florida. A compliance consultant paid $18,400 who had died in 2021. A secret dissent management folder containing my name in red ink, complete with talking points for board members. Mercer is unstable. Mercer has a personal vendetta. Mercer is a danger to property values. And the crown jewel, an email chain from the night Caroline overrode the engineer's 14-foot recommendations. Caroline, we are not turning our entrance into a truck stop. Ronnie agreed. Beauty, liability. We'll self-certify. Deborah seconded. Motion carries. Self-certify. 2 words that almost killed 3 people. The auditors presented their findings at an open-air town hall on the soccer field because the clubhouse was still sealed. Folding chairs in perfect rows, portable lights, a projector screen big enough for the back row to read every damning decimal. Rosa Gutierrez stood at the microphone in jeans and a plain gray sweater, no more lavender disinfectant, and fear. Tonight you will see exactly where your assessments went, she began. And tonight you will decide what we do about it. The screen lit up with spreadsheets, red arrows, and canceled checks. Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind across wheat. Someone in the 3rd row started crying. Not quiet tears, but the ugly, shoulder-shaking kind you can't fake. When the lights came up, the vote was unanimous. Immediate dissolution of the old board. 2. Full cooperation with criminal and civil investigations. 3. Class action lawsuit against the former officers for breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and reckless endangerment. Richard Kessler stood up in the back, smiling like a man who'd just been handed Christmas in October. Motion to appoint Alan Mercer as interim director of safety and code compliance until new elections, Rosa said. The applause started slow, then swelled until it rattled the portable speakers. I didn't campaign. I didn't even stand. I just raised one hand in acknowledgement, the same way I used to when a crew pulled a save, and the crowd on the sidewalk went wild. After the meeting, people lined up not to shake my hand, but to hand me things. A man from Lot 11 pressed a thumb drive into my palm, 8 months of threatening emails about his garage rebuild. A young couple on Redwood Lane gave me a folder of citations for flying an American flag exceeding regulation dimensions. The landscaper, yes, the actual landscaper, showed up with a shoebox full of inflated invoices he'd been told to submit or lose the contract. Each story was another brick in a wall we were finally tearing down. 2 weeks later, the district attorney announced charges: Caroline Mayweather, felony theft by deception, forgery, reckless endangerment. Ronnie Schultz, conspiracy and misuse of corporate funds. Deborah Lane, falsifying public records. Caroline turned herself in at the county jail wearing sunglasses and a silk scarf, cameras flashing like paparazzi at a fallen star. Ronnie tried to flee to his lake house. State troopers met him at the on-ramp 19 with cuffs ready. Deborah simply disappeared, last seen boarding a flight to Portugal with 1 carry-on and no return ticket. The clubhouse stayed locked for another month, while investigators in windbreakers carried out banker's boxes labeled evidence. One afternoon, I found myself standing alone in the empty boardroom. The long mahogany table was gone, replaced by folding tables stacked with documents. I ran my hand over the wall where Caroline's framed Community Excellence Awards used to hang. Only the nails remained. Rosa appeared in the doorway holding 2 bottles of water. They found the original gate blueprints in a storage unit registered to Caroline's cousin, she said quietly. The engineer's stamp was photoshopped. The city inspector, who supposedly signed off, retired in 2019 and lives in Montana. He's never even been to Dunfield. I nodded. It wasn't surprise anymore. It was just the final nail. That night, the neighborhood kids organized an impromptu ceremony on the slab where the archway had stood. They brought battery lanterns, chalk, and a single can of red spray paint. By morning, the concrete was covered in drawings, fire trucks with capes, houses with hearts, and one huge message in the center. We choose people over pretty. Someone added a tiny stick figure girl holding a flashlight guiding the trucks through. I didn't correct the grammar. I just stood there until the sun came up, letting the cold bite my cheeks, feeling something loosen in my chest that had been knotted since the night Emily died. The rot was out in the open now. The wound was cauterized. And for the first time in years, the air smelled like possibility instead of smoke. Healing didn't arrive with trumpets. It came in small, stubborn, beautiful acts that no one bothered to put on the agenda. First, it was the sidewalks. Kids who had once been fined for drawing hopscotch grids now covered every square of concrete with chalk fire trucks, rainbows, and giant letters that spelled, "Thank you, Mr. Mercer." The new board passed an emergency bylaw: chalk is always allowed. Then came the cookouts. No permits required, no sign-up sheets, no visual harmony police. Just folding tables dragged into the street, extension cords snaking from garages, and the smell of charcoal and second chances drifting over roofs that had almost burned. One Saturday in late October, Rosa knocked on my door holding a clipboard and a grin. "We're forming the Permanent Safety and Compliance Subcommittee. Your name is already on the charter. The only question is whether you'll accept the chair." I pretended to think about it for 3 full seconds. "On one condition," I said. "Every meeting is open, every document is public, and if anyone ever uses the word aesthetics in the same sentence as emergency access, again they're automatically removed." She laughed and handed me the pen. We rewrote the covenants from the ground up. Annual third-party fire safety audits paid from a locked transparency fund. All entrance barriers must maintain 14:6 in clearance 1 foot above code because close enough is never enough. Emergency override beacons installed at every access point keyed directly to dispatch. A whistleblower protection clause stronger than anything the city itself had any resident reporting a legitimate safety issue is granted full immunity from retaliation, backed by a $25,000 legal defense fund. The vote wasn't close. It was 3-12-0. The clubhouse reopened on a crisp November evening with the windows thrown wide and every light burning. No lavender disinfectant this time, just coffee grocery store cookies, and the low hum of people talking like neighbors again. Rosa stood at the same podium that once belonged to Caroline. "Tonight we're not voting on flower beds or flag sizes," she said. "Tonight we're voting on whether this community belongs to rules or to people." She didn't wait for applause. She just stepped aside and let a 12-year-old girl named Mia take the microphone. Mia lived on Redwood Lane. Her little brother was the boy who'd had the seizure the previous spring. She held up a piece of poster board with shaky marker letters. "Can we paint a mural on the clubhouse wall?" she asked. "About the fire. Not the scary part. The part where Mr. Mercer ran in, and the fire trucks finally got through because we made the gate taller, so we never forget." Silence for 2 heartbeats. Then the room erupted. We painted it the mural the following weekend. 47 kids, 23 adults, and 1 retired firefighter on a ladder with a paint roller in his hand. The design was simple: a red fire truck driving under a wide-open blue sky, and beneath it, in letters big enough to read from the street, 26 inches of grace. We choose life. We sealed it with marine-grade clear coat so the colors would outlast all of us. Winter settled in gentle that year. Snow came early and stayed, turning the scorched lawn of Lot 12 into a clean white page. Construction crews broke ground on a new, code-perfect entrance, dual lanes, 14:6 clearance solar-powered emergency strobes that flashed friendly blue when first responders approached. No gold trim, no mechanical wings, just open sky and the quiet promise that help would always fit. I stood on the curb one morning in my coat and hard hat, watching the concrete trucks pour the new footings. A little boy on a bicycle skidded to a stop beside me. "Are you the man who saved the fire truck?" he asked. I knelt so we were eye level. "I'm the man who made sure the fire truck could save you," I said. He thought about that, then grinned and pedaled away, shouting the news to the whole street. That afternoon, Elaine invited me for coffee on her back porch. We sat wrapped in blankets while steam curled from our mugs and the last leaves rattled overhead. "You know," she said softly, "we never hated you. We hated how brave you made us feel we weren't." I sipped my coffee and let the silence answer for me. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for being braver than the rest of us combined." Spring arrived all at once, the way it does when winter finally admits defeat. Cherry trees exploded pink along the new entrance. Kids flew kites on the soccer field. Someone hung a tire swing from the oak that had survived the fire. One Sunday, I drove out to the little park where Emily's house used to stand. The plaque was still there at the base of the oak, in memory of lives lost too early. May we always build safer paths. I laid a small bunch of daisies against the metal and stood there a long time. A groundskeeper in a city truck pulled up, recognized me from the news, and quietly left me alone. When I turned to go, I noticed fresh chalk on the sidewalk, leading away from the tree. Childish letters, wobbly but fierce. Emily, we fixed it. I swallowed hard, got back in my truck, and drove home with the windows down, letting the warm wind scour 13 years of smoke from my lungs. That night, the new board held its first official meeting in the street. No clubhouse, no walls. Just a circle of lawn chairs under the stars. Rosa handed me a small wooden plaque they'd had made. Director of Safety and Code Compliance, Alan R. Mercer, because some warnings are worth everything. I tried to give a speech. My voice cracked on the third word. So I just held it up, nodded until the clapping stopped. Later, walking home past the wide-open entrance, I paused under the new, taller arch. The night sky stretched above it like a promise kept. No lights, no gold trim, no mechanical arms, just moonlight on honest steel, and the soft sound of families laughing somewhere down the block. I realized I hadn't checked the binder in months. It was still in the closet pages, warped from humidity, red label faded. I carried it to the backyard fire pit, struck a match, and fed it in one page at a time. The flames took the violation notices, the midnight photos, the cease and desist letters, the death threats in spray paint. I watched until the last ember died and the ashes cooled. Then I scattered them over the garden, where Emily's daisies would grow next spring. Because proof wasn't in paper anymore. Proof was in the laughter of children riding bikes under an entrance that would never again stand in the way of a siren. Proof was in a neighborhood that had learned the difference between pretty and safe and chosen safe. Proof was in the quiet, steady beat of a heart that finally, after 13 long years, believed tomorrow could be gentle. The new entrance was finished on the first truly warm day of May. No ribbon cutting, no brass band, no gold-plated plaque. Just a flatbed dropping the final solar strobes, a city inspector signing the certificate with a satisfied nod, and a dozen kids racing their bikes through the open lanes to test whether the sky really had gotten taller. It had. 14 feet, 6 inches of pure, unapologetic sky. I stood on the curb in jeans and an old station t-shirt hard hat, dangling from one hand, watching the concrete trucks rumble away. A little girl I didn't know tugged my sleeve. "Mr. Mercer, does this mean the fire trucks can come save us now?" I crouched, looked her straight in the eye, and answered the way you answer when you've waited 13 years to be able to say it. "They never couldn't save you, sweetheart. We just finally stopped getting in their way." She thought about that, grinned, and pedaled off, shouting the news to the wind. That evening, the neighborhood gathered again, this time without agendas or microphones. Someone dragged out a portable speaker playing old Motown. Lawn chairs formed a loose circle around the new entrance. Coolers appeared. Someone produced a sheet cake iced with a red ladder truck and the words, "Thank you for 26 inches of grace." Rosa found me near the back, nursing a lemonade. "You're supposed to be in the middle of this, Alan." I shook my head. "I've had enough spotlights. Tonight belongs to them." She followed my gaze. Kids were chalking the fresh asphalt with hopscotch grids and giant hearts. A retired couple slow danced barefoot on the sidewalk. Elaine was laughing so hard at something the landscaper said that tears ran down her cheeks. Rosa bumped my shoulder. "Look what you started." "No," I said quietly. "Look what fear stopped and courage restarted." Later, when the sky went lavender and the first fireflies blinked on Mia, the girl with the mural idea came running up holding a small gift wrapped in newspaper comics. "We all chipped in," she said, suddenly shy. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a polished brass plate, the kind you bolt to a wall, in grateful memory of Emily and every inch that was fought for Dunfield Estates. Forever open. My throat closed. I could only nod until the words came. "Where do you want it mounted?" I finally managed. She pointed to the exact center of the new entrance beam, right where the old crown used to be. High enough that every fire truck can read it on the way in. We installed it the next morning. I climbed the ladder myself, drill in one hand, plaque in the other, while half the neighborhood watched from below. When the last screw seated home, someone started clapping. Then everyone did. The sound rolled down the street like gentle thunder. That afternoon, I drove back to Emily's park one last time. The oak had leafed out, thick and green. Someone, maybe the groundskeeper, maybe a child, had tied a single red ribbon around the trunk. At its base, among the daisies I'd planted months earlier, a new plaque had appeared, smaller, child-sized, chalked on a smooth stone. Emily. We fixed it. Love your new friends in Dunfield. I sat on the bench until the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long. A breeze stirred the ribbon. It fluttered like a small, brave flag. I didn't cry. I smiled, the kind that starts somewhere behind the sternum and works its way out slow. Because I finally understood the difference between an ending and a beginning. An ending is a house burned to ash and a gate that almost killed. A beginning is a plaque that says, forever open, and children who will grow up never knowing what it feels like to be afraid of their own front door. I stood, brushed grass from my jeans, and spoke to the tree the way you speak to an old partner who carried you through hell. We got there, kid. Took 13 years and one stubborn neighborhood, but we got there. The ribbon fluttered again as if in answer. On the drive home, I rolled every window down and let the warm May air scour the cab clean. Past the new entrance, wide, honest, unadorned, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and realized I hadn't seen that man in a very long time. He looked tired. He looked older. He looked peaceful. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light was on timer, same as always. But for the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a bunker. It felt like a place someone came home to because they wanted to, not because they had to. I stepped inside, closed the door, and stood in the quiet hallway. No binder in the closet. No ghosts in the corners. Just the soft tick of the kitchen clock and the faint scent of daisies I'd cut from the backyard that morning. I poured a glass of water, walked to the front window, and looked out at the street I'd once watched burn with worry. Kids were still riding bikes under the tall new arch. A firefly blinked once, twice, then rose toward the stars. Somewhere in the distance, a siren rose and fell, routine call, nothing urgent. This time, nothing stood in its way. I raised my glass to the night, to Emily, to every inch we'd clawed back from fear and vanity. Then I turned off the porch light, let the darkness settle, gentle and safe, and went to bed. For the first time in 13 years, I didn't dream of smoke. I dreamed of open sky, red trucks racing unimpeded, and a little girl waving from a second-story window, safe, laughing, alive. When I woke at dawn, the house was quiet. The street was quiet, and the world felt exactly the size it was always meant to be. Big enough for second chances, tall enough for mercy, and wide open for whoever needed to come home.